Welcome to the Pursuit Rooted podcast. I am Joseph Johnson. This is my lovely wife,
Samantha.
And we have Dan and India back here with us today for part 2 of the Enrich podcast. So we're talking about servanthood this month, and part 1, Dan and India were telling us their story, and now we're going to get into this incredible ministry that they're a part of and that they've raised up. So join us first and third Sundays of each month at 6 p.m. and come out, learn more about Pursuit, learn more about Jesus, and get involved. So I hope today's podcast will motivate you to get involved serving in the kingdom. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started.
All right. So, Dan, for everybody that doesn't know, explain what Enrich does and where you're located.
Sure. So Enrich is 5 years old now, roughly 5-6 years old. Enrich's mission is to increase the opportunities for people that are in active recovery in our community. It's the short way of answering it. We have a mission and a vision for the mission. That doesn't sound great. We have a mission and a vision for the nonprofit to keep us on track and to keep a trajectory true to the board, to the volunteers, to us, hold us accountable. But the long story short of it is that we're going to create opportunities for people that are in recovery that don't currently exist. Some of those are going to be related to the stigma associated with being in recovery. Some of those are going to be having to do with job opportunities, employers that wouldn't hire people normally. But with some training and some education and some interactions, it's really intentional, they would. And we've already seen it be fruitful through this program. They would hire people in active recovery. So those things, lowering the fatal opioid overdose rate in Madison County, which is historical right now and continues. The last 3 years, I think it's been record-breaking every single year. And then, in turn, lowering recidivism. So same thing, we want to have a measurable impact on the recidivism, which won't be very difficult considering where it's at right now. Unfortunately, then the opioid overdose rate, same thing, a measurable decrease in that as well. And then most notably the jobs and creating opportunities in our community for people that are coming from active recovery.
Okay. And where are you guys located at right now?
Right now we're located at 110 South 2nd Street in downtown Richmond, right off of 2nd Street in between Main and Water. It's the old Woods Motor Company. It's a 108-year-old building. It's gorgeous. And it's been many things in its life, many different car dealerships.
The last time I was in there before
They weren't selling cars. It's been many different bars along the way, but as India so eloquently stated when we purchased the building, it's a beautiful transformation from what the building was and what it can be. The same thing we're trying to do in the lives of the people that consume our services, a beautiful transformation.
Yeah. So before we get more into how you guys are making this happen, how you're fulfilling this mission, how did it start, India? What kicked all this off?
Dan was a sergeant at the police department, and I was in foster care. Well, he wasn't a sergeant at the time, but he was a police officer, and I was in foster care. And he, before that, had worked at the jail, and so we had a lot of interesting dinner conversations. We were seeing that people were having struggles that we felt like our community was missing, that there wasn't help in some specific areas, specifically with employment, but overall it was because of names and stories and faces, and hearing about the hard things that people were facing without the help that they needed. And I think that, we've had a long life of servanthood. Both of us have always kind of been geared toward wanting to help people, and we were seeing something that we felt like was a need that was being unmet. And we were praying for somebody else to do something about it. Actually, is really where it started.
I wonder how often that happens.
In all of our lives. One specific story that was really sad and super frustrating about watching the same cycle happening in a family. And Dan was like, "Yeah, and that happens for so and so, so and so, and so and so and so and so." And I remember writing all those names down and circling them and just praying specifically for those people, but praying for somebody in the community to help them with employment. And then lo and behold, it turned out to be us. And that was a long road between seeing that there was a place in the community that needed something different, praying about what that would look like. And eventually it looked like a restaurant, which led us to a DV8 workshop, which really led us to learn a lot about the recovery community. And then we ended up with a building of 17,500 square feet. So it was going to be a lot more than a restaurant. Yeah, that's how it started with prayer and following the Lord's leading. We weren't even really sure what it was supposed to be, which has been awesome to kind of learn along the way.
So in its current form, what is the process that Enrich has for people in active recovery? Like, what you mentioned a couple different things. You're helping get employment,
restaurant.
Yeah. So take us through, like, what's this look like? Yeah. What is the current state of Enrich?
Most frequent question that I answer. Yeah. So I've kind of come up with a good answer for it, and I answer it top down from the building's perspective. Yeah. So the building's 3 levels, and the very top level is a structured sober living community. This will be ran by Enrich. It's a 6-person structured sober living community where they'll be working our program. It's a faith-based program. It's something that we control. It's not controlled by any kind of medical or third party anything. This is organic, and it's going to be very effective. We're super excited about it. The team that's making that, there's a committee that is over that program, and they're outstanding. Just the best of the best, exactly what our community deserves. Working your way down in the building, the biggest room on the main floor is the venue space. And the venue space, and keep in mind, these from day one, these were not things that we knew were going to exist. This is what the Lord has given us. Yes, we would have said no. I've told people, if the Lord revealed this to us from day one as a 17,500 square foot project with all these different things going on, it would have been a hard no. And, but I think he intentionally kind of protected us from that originally and has gotten us to where we're at. So now we're just being good stewards of the space that he's given us and being intentional about seeking his will for every inch of that building, from the rafters to the floor. So the main space in the main floor is going to be a venue space that's open to the public. It's massive. It's a free span room. It's got a 74-foot bar that is no longer wet. It's a dry bar. And it's going to be a beautiful space for people to come together as a community. And regardless of, your spiritual preference or literally anything else, it's a place that people will come into that building from the public to have events that are important to them. And our goal, kind of behind the scenes, but not super behind the scenes, is that every single person that walks through those doors has an interaction with Jesus. And that can look like a lot of different ways. But as we've prayed and we've seen already in that building, that the Spirit is literally in the rafters of that building and easily awakened by the wildest things that happen in that building, from an R group where it broke out speaking in tongues to worship nights and everything in between. There's birthday parties and graduation parties. And what a cool opportunity for us to start to bridge the gap, because people don't even know some people don't know where the money is going, and it's going to a community project that is bridging the gap, and they are supporting that project without even knowing. It's an effective way to use your money. It's just a really beautiful thing, but it's also really deeply rooted in our program. Now, we didn't know it originally, but now it is. So that venue space, obviously it takes work to create a venue space like that. That venue space will be set up and tore down and prescribed essentially by the guys or gals that are in our sober living facility upstairs. So if Pursuit wants to host a Christmas party at that, and you call me up and you say, hey, we had a really good podcast here. We did 100 people. I need 100 chairs and 10 tables. I need the linens to be this color, this and that on this date. You contact the events coordinator, who's part of that program, and then they would essentially dispatch the sober living peoples down, and they would set it up exactly. They'd be compensated for their work, and likewise to tear it down. And it's kind of working, and the money, of course, goes to the mission Enrich. And then the people that are in our recovery program are compensated, but not in cash. It's a long-term investment with the financial literacy program that has going on. Again, very deep, but a really good program. So that's a deep way that's integrated. And then the front of the building is the restaurant.
They'll only hire 100% of the people that will be hired will be in active recovery.
Yep, and a lot of exciting things to come about the restaurant soon that we can't quite speak on just yet because it hasn't been completely legally finalized, but some really cool opportunities coming. What we believe is the best of the best for our community, and we would settle for no less. So excited about that. And then that leaves still, though, a side part of the building, which is equally as massive, and then a whole basement of a separate, essentially, building that we'll be good stewards of when the Lord wants us to be, and that's not yet. So it's sitting.
One thing at a time. Yeah.
Yes.
We're okay with that.
Yep. So that's the services that you can expect, and those are the physical services that you'll be able to expect when the building is open. Right now, you'll find a construction zone if you were to walk in there. The venue space is limping, but it's operable. We have one bathroom. we'll have a lot more bathrooms here in about a week or two, I hope. But Enrich will have that presence, but also in the recovery community, we really needed an honest center table of sorts for this conversation. The conversation had kind of been had beforehand about how we're gonna, like, collectively as a community combat this. But it was kind of sporadic, and it was the people at that table, some of which were exactly who they needed, and some of which probably could have been suited better by maybe a different person if we were being honest. And there was that honest conversation that someone needed to kind of just say, hey, holding you accountable as a public leader, as a person in this field, as the director of this organization, these are the things that we need to talk about. This is how we need to do it. Not procedurally, but we need to come together and come up with that decision. So Enrich is kind of being that table for the community, that center of what we'd like to say, the center of hope in downtown. It's literally, you can't get closer to the center of downtown unless you stand in the middle of the road. It's a really beautiful thing to have that big of a space for that kind of thing. And then there's also other little projects that we've got going on. We have an anonymous supporter that works very closely with us. It's developing an app for the community. It's an accessibility to resources app for Madison County. So spiritual resources, housing resources, anything to do with Enrich, you will see on this app. It'll be live. You'll see a bed count for different facilities. If you want to know if there's a bed open at this facility, that's our goals for this app. So there's a lot. It's turned into this big thing.
Yeah.
So the easy way to answer your question is that Enrich will be whatever God wants it to be. And it could only be what God wanted it to be as far as God had ordained us to take it. And we have lots more work to do, Indy and I do. But what he's really shown us as of late is that getting more people involved and getting the community involved, spiritual or not, is what he wanted. And he wanted all that to happen under that roof. And seeing all those people come together, this program has literally exploded like a firework into 100 different directions. And under the same mission and vision that we started this podcast with that goal in mind, all of these little things that are finally happening in our community effectively, efficiently, that's what needed to happen and could only happen by the hand of God. And we're really thankful to be a part of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You go to the next question?
Yeah. So I know there's been several. I've got to hear a couple of them. But could you share a time when God supernaturally moved in a way for Enrich that you couldn't explain?
What day of the week? What hour?
Yeah, I would say that we have seen God be faithful so many times, and that's why we can look at a 17,000.
Oh, tell them a wild story. Tell them a wild one.
I know, but and not.
Yeah, warm them up first. Warm them up. Yeah, warm them up first.
We're not.
We gotta build.
Yeah. From the time that we, with 8 minutes to spare after our computer crashed and had to go to Office Depot and get a new one, with 8 minutes to spare, submitted for a grant and got every dollar that we asked for. $595,000. Am I dead?
You don't stop.
Okay. $595,000. Every dollar. That was huge. Or to the point of when. Well, I don't know. Do you want to tell the Waffle House story?
That's what I had.
Okay. Well, I'll
mind.
tell the location story, and you tell that one, and we'll be quick.
Okay.
Okay.
Supernatural experience. We were at the very beginning of Enrich, and we were getting ready to go public, and we had a photo shoot, video thing lined out with Epic Films out of Winchester. They were coming to Richmond, and we were going to be downtown, and he was going to do some scenic interviews and some footage and interview us. So this was the video that we were going to go live in the community with. And the night before this, I had to work because I can never get off, and so I had to work the night beforehand. And my shift got dispatched to a kidnapping in progress at Waffle House off Exit 90 in Richmond, and crime's on the rise. There's no hiding it, but it's not like that. There are not people getting snatched up in Richmond. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So when this happened, we get spike calls. We get calls that are just off you just hear them and you're like, there's literally no way. This was one of those where there's no way. But we got a second call on it. Same report that there was a lady sitting in a booth and she was eating her order, and a guy came in and forcibly removed her, threw her in a car, and they left the parking lot after a brief struggle and got onto the interstate southbound. And that there were two separate witnesses that did not know each other that reported it. So that changes our response, obviously, to any call of any kind of where I'm kind of questioning if it's legit or not. That second caller that sees the same thing, obviously that adds some credibility. So everybody's responding up there, and we get up there and we get the witnesses separated. One is a Waffle House employee from London who's filling. This is during COVID, I believe, and Waffle House was having a really hard time staffing. They had no employees at this location, so they were spot staffing from other locations. From London was the one witness, and another witness, or the other witness, the other employee had traveled from Minnesota or somewhere, like in a hotel room working for Waffle House to keep this location open, essentially. So she said. I'll get to that in a minute. But so we separated them, we interviewed them. Part of the interview process is obviously, what did you see? What is your name? I need your phone number, your date of birth for the report and all that jazz. It's just required fields. And that's also common practice to log the person in the call. And by that, I mean we run their name on the radio. They make sure that they aren't a wanted convicted felon. And then they add them to the call so that when I go to do my report and I pull it back up, I can say, yeah, I talked to Joe Johnston, date of birth, phone number, yada, yada, yada. So we do that. Well, I had the unfortunate circumstance of the witness that I was interviewing had a lot of warrants. And I felt terrible because she had done the right thing. And based on her warrants, she had a troubled past with law enforcement, I'm sure. And she finally, she called the cops when it was right and it was necessary. And she wasn't afraid of us. And she gave me an outstanding statement, very vivid, like I was living it with her. And, gosh, I felt terrible. Let her smoke as many cigarettes she wanted. We hung out. We moved money. We called her son. We did all the things that I could possibly do to accommodate her and took her to the jail. We got to the jail, and the other lady, just to close that part out, the other lady, she couldn't keep the store open alone procedurally, I guess, so they had to close down for the night. And they were both tore up. They're both crying. They were not in any shape to work anyway. So the restaurant closed, and the other lady went on her way as a witness. So this lady, I get to the jail and get her warrants typed out, and I told her it was time to go inside to the jail out of the Sally Port, and she wouldn't get out of my car. It's just not a problem that I commonly run into. Usually it's the opposite, but she wouldn't get out of my police truck. And what had happened on the way down to the jail was I had kind of told her the vision of Enrich. It was young, what we were going to be doing in the morning and all this. And she was very passionate, obviously. She had lived experience, and she was, lightly crying and just kind of telling me a little bit about herself. And we got to the jail, and she wouldn't get out. And I was like, sweet, you're going to have to get out of my truck. Or eventually this is going to come to me pulling you out of my truck. And I really don't want it. It's not worth all that.
This is the end result.
Yeah, please don't. Like, we're at the jail. There's nothing else to do. And she basically said, I won't get out of your truck until you call somebody. And I was like, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I was like, who do you want me to call? And she said his name. And she told me the name. And essentially he's a big, he's huge in the recovery world for recovering out loud. And he's a pillar of that recovery world in this community, in all of Kentucky, I would say. An amazing guy. He's on our board now. And the only reason I'm not saying his name because the story this time, the way I'm telling is not about him. But she said, you have to call him. And I said, I'll call him, but I'm not going to call him right now. You need to get out of my truck. Like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. So she said, I'll only get out of your truck on one condition. If you promise me that you're going to call him tomorrow morning. And I said, I promise. Get out of my truck. So she got out of my truck, and I wrote the number down. And I didn't call him immediately when I got off. We waited a little while. Yeah. So by call, she meant send him a message because she didn't have his phone number, and all I had, she showed me his Facebook and basically said, this is how you'll get in contact with him. So I did. I sent him a message, and I said, this is who I am. Long story short, he came to meet me. It was a life-changing event for us, and that was a supernatural experience in itself. He has been a blessing to our organization more than I can say. God has used him in so many different ways to reach so many different people. It's changed his perspective on recovery, on law enforcement, on so many different fronts. It made that video that you've all probably seen that we released several years ago what it is. It was incredible.
Yeah.
The way
also
that
taught us things about the recovery community that we needed to learn.
Yep.
It changed what Enrich would be.
Yeah.
For sure.
So it was really amazing, and Richmond certainly wouldn't be what it is today without that interaction that I had to lead me to meet that person. Yeah. But that isn't the wildest part of the story. The wildest part of the story is that you may be wondering what happened to the kidnapping that happened.
I was sitting over here
Originally.
waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Waffle House is a professional business. Obviously, there are cameras in Waffle House. So we had called. It was a pretty big deal. We called out a detective, and detectives came out. And good friend of mine, one of the only other Christian guys that I work with, was the detective that worked the case and pulled the tapes. It took him a while to get it back because corporate. You send an email request and a subpoena, whatever, and then you get it back. And he never followed up with me. So like a week later, I was like, "Hey, what was the disposition of that abduction?" And he said, "What abduction?" And I said, "The one at Waffle House that you responded to the other night that we worked. Like, where did, like we had a plate number, like where did they go or whatever." And he said, I can't even say it really. He said, "It never happened." And I was like, "What do you mean it never happened? We were all there. Like we heard that they were literally they were hiding behind the bar. Like the doors were locked. Like we were both there. It happened." And he said, "We watched the video from start to finish. It never happened." And it never happened.
So there was not a man that came and abducted a woman.
Nope.
But both women saw it.
Yes.
And just the response that you saw on them wasn't as though they were making this up. It was that they had lived this experience of watching a man come in and
She
abduct a
was in
woman.
jail, like,
For a long time. Yeah. Yeah. She knew she
Like
had a
the
warrant.
tapes weren't like doctored,
No.
nothing like that.
Because I
That's
asked, I
how
said,
they
"You
did
watched the
it.
wrong day." And he said, No, we didn't. We watched several days.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the most beautiful thing is that we've still been in contact with her. You know, she
Yep.
is sober. She's still doing well. She feels like this was a good thing for her that she got those warrants off of her back. That it's truly a fresh start, and that she's not just sober, but she's also free. You know, she doesn't have any. It's just wild.
I wish I could have been there. The guy I got introduced to was the one that told her that part of the story eventually. Like, what you saw didn't actually happen. Like, I know you saw it happen, but it didn't happen. That, like, how do you explain that to somebody respectfully? You know what I mean? So he handled that, but no, she was. I don't think she was surprised because she has seen the fruits of Enrich as well, and she sees this fruits of the Spirit and how they've manifested in her lives, and that guy's life, and our life. And God has used just the wildest circle. Like I have a note in my phone that is like that long of just the wildest things that have happened that God has used to get our attention, to lead us to this person or that circumstance or this opportunity. And yeah, so that's that's one of the very first ones, but that's one of the wildest things that I've lived through spiritually that God's used.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So, getting into a little bit more to you all leading Enrich, because I want to stick with the time here. Thank you for sharing that. That's wild. This just blew my mind. That's incredible.
Oh, me too. I still stew on it.
So as far as the vision for Enrich now and in the future, you've shared a little bit about that. And you have a lot of different people helping and being involved in this. And how are you all keeping that vision forward, India? Like, how are you keeping that going? How are you keeping the momentum behind this? What's that look like for you guys as a part of you leading this?
I would say that first, we've learned we cannot manufacture this passion on our own, that we have to ask the Lord to help us to do that. And that's been our prayer from the beginning, was that God would keep our passion alive for what we're doing. But also, like you said, we have a lot of people, and people are wind in your sails. You know, people who come in with fresh ideas and fresh energy, and they're excited. And so that helps too, just the community building aspect. But I would say also keeping our vision and moving forward, it comes first from our foundation. You know, we have a statement of faith, and we have a board, and we have people that remind us this is what you're doing, this is the goal, this is why you're doing it. We have people coming alongside of us. But I would also think that it's somebody really put it in perspective for me a couple months ago at one of our prayer meetings. They're saying, like, you have to stop looking at Enrich as something that's going to happen once you have all these funds raised and the doors are open, because Enrich is already happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what keeps us moving forward.
That shocked us.
Yeah, it's like, you're right though. Like hope is growing right now.
Yeah. We envisioned a ribbon cutting day one, and then starting to track statistics from that point when we were behind the ball from the rip.
Yeah, because lives are already changing, you know, and that's what happens when hope is introduced. And that's what happens when people interact with Holy Spirit, you know, and people see Jesus, and they, you know, so I would say that that's one of the things that just keeps us moving right now is that it's not a goal in the future. It's already happening.
Nice. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So before, as we wrap up, I want to get some more information from you guys about if people want to get involved in Enrich. But real quick, another fun question here. You want to go ahead and ask that one? Fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah. Out of all 9 fruits of the Spirit, if you could only choose one, which one do you think has been the most fruitful for you in terms of leadership?
Love.
Yeah.
Because Alan Jackson said so.
Bad answer.
But really, because of what we already talked about, the leading with love, that's most certainly been.
Without love, it's all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, it hits on all of them, but luckily we had a little bit of time to stew on this question before you asked it on camera, and we did. We talked about several, but.
We've definitely seen patience. We've definitely seen that we have had to trust God with his timing and with everything. We've really needed patience. But I would say love, because the rest of it's useless without it. If you don't love people, you're definitely not going to be patient with them.
Yeah. I have so many more leadership questions, but we need to do a separate, just like leadership podcast. You were over there talking about, growing in leadership and stuff earlier, and I was just,
I love it.
Wheels were turning. So if someone was listening, they need help, they need to know where they can find that help. What opportunities are there through Enrich or, in the county that they can access? Where would you send them? If somebody were to be listening to this and say, I need the help that they're talking about, what would they do?
Well, our the network that Enrich will have isn't completely built out yet. The infrastructure is there; it just isn't live. It's a lot of going on in the background. I mean that in the form of like a website and an app and phone number and all this. However, we do have a phone number that anybody can call. It's going to go straight to a voicemail box, but I get an immediate alert whenever it gets a message. The equivalent of a text message. It comes right to my phone. I can see it. Our phone number, Enrich's phone number, is 859-514-2170. Or you can find more information at www.enrichky.com. We're on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, and at the very, if somebody needed immediate help, even if it wasn't necessarily emergent help, like I need to go to the hospital help, but if it was that urgent where somebody was like, I need to go somewhere right now and get help, or I need to talk to somebody, they can always call the non-emergency line for dispatch and tell them. They can even be as specific as, I need the services of Enrich. Someone needs to wake up Dan, and they will call me and wake me up. There's very few people that can ring right through the do not disturb, and they're one of them, and it's for that purpose. And we will make ourselves available. So, but eventually that'll be a much more accessible platform. That's the whole purpose, is that it's accessible, it's easy to get to, it's easy to use the resources that we have existing to identify the ones that we need to create within our community. But in the time being, while we're still getting spun up, but like we just talked about, God's already using us. So we're just kind of rolling with it as we can. The phone number is probably the easiest way to get a hold of us for an immediate response.
Okay. And if we had anybody that wanted to come and volunteer, wanted to give monetarily, like what options do we have there? If someone said, I want to come and I got these skills.
We always need people to volunteer, and India is so good about sending out a weekly update, and it's not spam. You're not probably even get more than one email a week, but every week she sends out this is where we came from, this is what we're doing this week, this is what's happening next week, this is our calendar, these are our monetary needs, these are our volunteer needs, these are the upcoming work sessions, and these are the events. It's very comprehensive, but it's boom, 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 and you can literally ride this train with us. If you are interested in being on that mailing list, you just need to email india@enrichky.com. or myself, Dan, @enrichky.com. And the same would go for any questions that are a little bit less urgent about donating or getting involved, or a service that we should include, or any questions about our mission, speaking engagements, anything like that should all go to those email addresses. But to donate's a little bit easier. We do have that built out pretty well, and that's just on the website, enrichky.com/donate, and it'll take you to our vetted Give Butter profile. And the Give Butter is it's a platform that is specifically for nonprofits that takes no money from the donation. It gives the donor the opportunity to cover the small fee so that the mission can inherit the entire amount. So that's what we use, and it's worked very well.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Do you have any other questions to ask before we wrap up here? There's so much more we could explore here. Yeah. And we probably will have to have another set of podcasts. So thank you guys so much for sharing your story, for encounter with Jesus, being yielded to God and just following Him through servanthood. This has been a really, really awesome podcast. So I know people listening are really going to enjoy it too. So thank you for what you're doing in our county as well. It's incredible.
Joe, I want to answer that one question though that you didn't ask. The advice to young Christians.
Oh,
just
okay.
starting.
Let's do it. Go
Sorry,
for it.
I have
Bonus
an answer for
question
that
with
one.
Dan.
You want to ask it?
Yeah. Dan, if you could give one piece of advice to young Christians just starting, what would it be?
If you feel unqualified for the task that the Lord is leading you to, like you're standing at the foot of a mountain or at the lip of a body of water that is just too far to traverse by any means, then you are exactly where God wants you to be. I truly believe that if you're praying for His will in your life and He leads you to that spot on this earth, spiritually, physically, emotionally, we have lived experience, good and bad here. We've taken both routes, but it's literally opportunity to step out in faith, and that's your only option. You either don't do it, or your option is to step out in faith and rely on Him, and He will make the impossible happen. And we have seen that financially. We have seen that physically. When we ask for $60,000, we get $120,000. God is just funny like that. We didn't ask for any money, and He granted us $595,000. We asked for a couple 100 square foot building, like the size of this floor of the church, and He gave us 17,500 square feet, one of the biggest standalone buildings in the city. We asked for a downtown location. He put it in the center of downtown. We asked for volunteers. He gave us several hundred. We asked for money. He gave us $1 million. Like it goes on, but it all started, being completely honest here, it all started from a position where we had to make a very uncomfortable and difficult decision starting out that, like, God, this is in your hands, sincerely. I can't do this. I can't raise this much money. I can't gain this much support from the community. I can't get these people to meet and talk. I can't do these things, but you can.
I don't even want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is normal, and that is okay. And wherever you are in your young walk or old walk, it doesn't matter. But specifically to young Christians, because this was me, and this was one of the biggest maturing factors of my spiritual growth, was going through this journey of Enrich. I mean, I told you about my spiritual walk in the other podcast series or episode, from age 0 to, let's just call it 30 for even numbers. I had all that spiritual growth, but really compared to what we did with Enrich, like in just a couple years, standing at the foot of those mountains and being able to only act on the strength that God gives me and seeing the fruits of that in faith have been incredible. And if more people would stand at the bottom of that mountain, look up and say that I know I can do this with God, and not shy away from it, not try and go around it, not try and find a different way by your own means humanly possible to do it, then just think about how many more Enriches there would be, how many more opportunities there would be for us to grow the kingdom, what it would look like. And that's my challenge for the younger spiritual Christians that are just getting started out in there. I know that is hard, because we have lived that, but it most certainly is worth it.
That was very beautifully put. Thank you for answering that question I didn't ask.
That was from the Spirit. I scrolled and I was like, I need to answer this one.
No.
So now you can close out, Jay.
That was a
Permission.
great
You have permission to close my podcast now.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
How do I close this out? Tell me how to close this out.
Just look at the camera and say, do what Jesus said.
Do what Jesus said.
There you go.
Want to grab the camera. Do what Jesus said.